That was the voice that broke through Iranian radio waves just hours after US and Israeli strikes hit the country on February 28, 2026. And since then, it hasn't stopped transmitting. Every day, at exactly 9:30 p.m. and 5:30 p.m. Iranian time, the signal goes live, and the voice returns, delivering the same strange messages. Even Farsi speakers can't fully make sense of it. Only one thing is clear. Someone, somewhere, is trying to send a message as the war in Iran intensifies. The question is, what is it trying to say? And to whom? The first to notice the ominous signal was the Priom organization, a group of civilian monitors spread across the world, known for identifying, recording, and tracking some of the most mysterious radio transmissions in recent years. The message opened with the same three Persian words. Translation: attention, attention, attention. Analysts turned up the volume and glued their ears to their system speakers, but as the strange, almost robotic voice continued, no one could make out what it was actually saying. Listeners could only distinguish a list of seemingly random Persian numbers. Some were given in groups of 5 digits, others one by one, like this: 9, 6, 4. The message carried on for over 10 minutes before cutting off and starting again, delivering yet another incoherent string of digits. It could have been some sort of test, a way to establish a communication line in and out of Iran if traditional channels went dark. But that theory was quickly discarded. Just a few days later, another transmission was confirmed. A theory quickly emerged. Someone inside Iran was trying to reach an individual or group beyond its borders. Perhaps they were reporting on conditions inside the country. Or perhaps they were planning something far more ominous. A vengeance against all of those responsible for claiming the life of its supreme leader. But then, something unexpected happened. The transmission, now labeled V32 by analysts, had been airing for only a few days when it was noticed someone was trying to silence it, flooding its frequency with harsh static that drowned out the numbers read by the mysterious voice. Experts quickly pointed out that the interference had all the markings of Iran's so-called bubble jammer, a tool the regime has used in the past to block broadcasts of ideological enemies. If true, it meant that whatever was being transmitted, the regime didn't want anyone to hear it. But if Iran isn't behind V32, then who is? One of the prime suspects is the United States. During the Cold War, the nation became very familiar with radio messages like this. They are known as numbers stations, and consist of shortwave radio transmissions used either by government agencies or secret spy networks to deliver instructions to undercover units across the globe. The pattern is almost always the same. They start with something that lets agents know they are on the correct frequency and that the transmission is about to begin. For almost 3 decades, the number station known as Lincolnshire Poacher, believed to have been transmitted by the British Secret Intelligence Service, used a simple melody. Alternatively, they can instead use a single phrase or word, as with the V32 station. Whatever the interval signal, what truly matters is what comes next. Then, the transmission relays a series of numbers that, although seemingly random, have been carefully selected. These follow a hidden code, one considered virtually impossible to break without a one-time pad, which allows agents to convert the numbers into letters. But even if someone were to intercept the transmission and somehow get their hands on the decoding method, that still wouldn't guarantee they could understand the full message. Journalist Mike Eckel from Radio Free Europe explains, quote, "Even if you translate the numbers into words, the message would likely still make no sense without the right decoder key." During the 1990s, the United States was up against a Cuban numbers station, relaying concealed messages to undercover agents armed with little more than Sony radios and laptops. Yet even then, it wasn't until the FBI broke into one of the spies' apartments and extracted the decryption program from their computer that they were able to fully crack their communications. The decoded Cuban messages could be as ominous as, quote, "Prioritize and continue to strengthen friendship with Joe and Dennis," or as seemingly trivial as, quote, "Congratulate all the female comrades for International Day of the Woman." Regardless of their content, U.S. officials knew that any covert transmission represented a serious national security threat, and perhaps also the perfect weapon to bring an enemy to its knees. If the mysterious signal traced near Iran is indeed a U.S. numbers station, it could be used by CIA operatives to activate sleeper cells across the country, or perhaps even to communicate with assets embedded within different levels of the regime without drawing too much attention or exposing the American strategy. Still, not everyone is convinced that the U.S. is relying on this somewhat crude secret communications tactic in its war against Iran, and many continue to look at other suspects to determine who is truly behind the transmission. If America is not behind the mysterious numbers station, then the next most likely suspect is Israel. According to some analysts, while the exact origin of the transmission can't yet be pinpointed, early reports suggest it may be coming from somewhere around the Red Sea area. It would also make sense for Israel to rush to establish alternate channels of communication with agents shortly after the first round of attacks on Iran. Unlike the United States, Israel's mainland sits well within range of both the Iranian regime and regional allies like Hezbollah in Lebanon, which has recently resumed aggression against the country. And while Israel does possess an impressive defense network, supported in great part by its Iron Dome, the nation is not immune to regional communication disruptions, which could, at least temporarily, leave traditional intelligence operations in the dark. However, given the relative simplicity of operating a numbers station, Israel is far from the only actor in the region capable of sustaining something like V-32. Other analyses suggest that V-32 may not be centered around the Red Sea at all, but rather in Europe, specifically somewhere between northern Italy, western Germany, and eastern France, as noted by the Priam organization. If that is the case, there are two main explanations for why European territory would be tied to a conflict that, until recently, many nations were desperately trying to avoid. The first is that V-32 is not operated by Europeans at all, but by foreign intelligence services, perhaps American, using military infrastructure in allied countries to broadcast these secret messages. The second theory is that the station is being run by Iranian dissidents or exiles based in Europe, attempting to establish communication with people inside the country, perhaps to coordinate evacuation efforts or pass critical information to resistance groups opposing the regime. However, Priam notes that if the exile theory were true, the host country would likely have already identified the group and shut down the operation to avoid being drawn into the conflict. This suggests that either these foreign Iranian networks are quietly supported by European states, or that this theory is entirely off the mark. To further deepen the mystery, some listeners have pointed to yet another possibility. According to some, the voice reading the numbers carries what sounds like a slight Russian accent. It wouldn't be a stretch to imagine some level of Russo-Iranian cooperation in the current conflict. Russia has already relied on Iranian-made drones in Ukraine, and reports suggest it has, in return, provided Iran with intelligence on U.S. positions in the region. Perhaps that is what V-32 is transmitting: coordinates, targeting data, or reports on American forces. But if that were really the case, then why would Iran be jamming the signal of its own allies? Not long after the first jamming efforts began, V-32 went off the air, only to reappear a few days later on a different frequency. The sensors quickly took notice, and after a brief period of uninterrupted transmissions, they returned, this time targeting V-32's new frequency. Since then, the two sides appear to have fallen into a predictable pattern. Whenever V-32 is jammed, it shifts to another frequency, only to be tracked down and jammed once again. While no one knows for certain who is behind each side, all signs point to two opposing forces locked in a silent battle. One is trying to push its message through, the other is determined to keep it buried. Or is that really what's happening? Some have suggested that the jamming itself could be part of the deception, that Iran may be deliberately interfering with the signal to create the illusion that it isn't behind V-32 at all. Adding to the enigma, some transmissions have included occasional English words spoken with a heavy accent, like during this March 11th broadcast.
Specifically.
Is this part of the code? Or could it be a deliberate attempt to mislead listeners, making it seem as though the Americans are responsible, when in reality, it's the Iranians or Russians who are the masterminds behind the operation? Unfortunately for analysts, there are very few clues to follow. The most attentive listeners have only picked up faint background details, like the hum of a fan in the room where the voice is being recorded, or the occasional system sound associated with a Windows 10 computer, leaving many of us wondering, what comes next? If Iran is truly using the V-32 station to issue instructions to agents abroad, the consequences could be grim. According to reports, in recent years, the Iranian regime has deployed undercover agents across the globe to carry out attacks against foreign journalists and government officials. Just earlier this month, it was revealed that a man in New York had been found guilty of attempting to carry out a plot to take out the American president. Beyond direct attacks on specific targets, Iranian operatives could also be receiving instructions to target systems and critical infrastructure. As journalist Shane Harris explains, quote, "The country has long had a sophisticated and diverse cyber force, which U.S. officials have linked to operations that have crashed bank websites and probed critical infrastructure, including the control systems of a dam in New York State." While no major attacks by Iranian assets abroad have been reported so far, some fear the regime may simply be preparing its agents for the right moment to strike. The V-32 station could be part of that process, used to relay updates on the war or coordinate future operations in real time. Of course, there is another possibility: that the station is not meant to activate sleeper cells at all, but only to intimidate through a steady stream of long, cryptic broadcasts meant to force the United States and Israel to constantly look over their shoulders. Whatever the true purpose of V-32 may be, governments around the world can only hope that, whatever message it carries, it is never deciphered.
0 4 0